So where do we begin the process? You can begin this in a variety of different ways. You can activate a new tab up on the ribbon. We're not going to do that, although you can. I think it's pretty easy to start with the View tab. Now, click here. In the rightmost button, we see Macros. I'm going to click the drop arrow here. And I want to record a macro. Remember, you don't just jump into this step without any pre-thought. You've figured out that there's a sequence here that you'd like to automate. So here's the Record Macro dialog box. We'll see this a few times today. And we need to give this macro a name. And don't worry too much about the naming convention here. A couple of basic ideas. The macro name cannot begin with a number. It cannot contain a space. You can use an underscore character if you wish, and I tend to do that. You can also shift between upper and lower case. So I'm going to call this particular macro Highlight Value Cells. And by the way, you've got up to 255 characters here too, so that's plenty. Value cells. And ideally, what do? We make this as meaningful as we can. Highlight value cells. Now, a shortcut key is not a requirement. It sounds appealing, and in many respects it is, but certainly there will be some limitations. If you've identified already 5 or 6 different kinds of sequences that you'd like to turn into macros, the idea of having each one having a meaningful letter, you quickly run out of meaningful letters. And if I'm thinking of the word cells here, should I be about to make this shortcut be Control-C? Well, right away, I think a lot of you are saying, well, what about Control-C for copy? This will override that choice. So there's a tendency for a lot of people when they're recording macros, if they want to use a keystroke shortcut, to not use lowercase letters. But you only really have 52 choices here. Now, we could use Control-C, but that would mean we can't use Control-C for copy. So should I use Control-V for value? Well, I won't be able to use Control-V for paste. So I'm holding down the Shift key right now, and maybe the key letter in my mind is V. Remember, I'm holding down the Shift key as I click the letter V, and automatically the word Shift appears there. Now again, I'll emphasize and say a few times, you don't necessarily need to have a keystroke shortcut. If you don't assign one now, you could do this later, or later you could remove one, or you could change it later as well. So a number of options there. And I think over time you'll decide how useful this capability is. Now, something we haven't mentioned yet is that when you do record a macro, all the steps that you take actually get converted in or stored as some programming code. It's called VBA, Visual Basic for Applications. And you don't have to know a whole lot about that code, although we will talk about it and show you some examples. But it has to be stored somewhere. When you record a macro, the code that gets generated by what you do gets stored in different locations, and you've got a choice here. If the macro that you are recording is one that you think you could use in this workbook, that workbook, or perhaps any workbook, then the place you want to store that is the location called Personal Macro Workbook. And right away you might be saying, well, what's that and where is it? If you have never recorded a macro or never seen this term before, you are in effect in the process now of creating a new file whose name is personal, P-E-R-S-O-N-A-L, .xlsb. This is going to happen automatically. If you say, I only will use the macro I'm about to record in the current workbook, then you'll store it in this workbook. But let's say the macro we're talking about here is designed potentially to be working in any macro, in any different workbook. So we'll store it in Personal Macro Workbook. Provide a description when necessary. I think in a short macro like this, we wouldn't really need to do this, but it is suggested and recommended, good documentation. Explain what the macro does. I think here the name does enough, so we'll overlook that. So I'm about to click OK, and the key idea coming up is that for the next few minutes, or however long it's going to take, everything we do in Excel is going to be recorded, with a few exceptions. So I'm going to click OK. Now, just before I do, look in the lower left-hand corner. You'll see the word Ready, and you may or may not see a button to the right of it. I'm going to click OK. And that button to the right of the word Ready is changed. As I'm sliding over it, pop-up says, a macro is currently recording. Click to stop recording. Now, I've got the active cell anywhere in here. If I do scrolling right now, That's going to be in the macro. Now, it's not going to hurt, but the idea is to stay focused here. So what are we going to do? The very steps I mentioned before. Go to the Home tab, click the Find and Select button in the editing group on the right-hand side. Choose Go to Special. Remember, this is what I had done manually before. I want to choose Constants and then uncheck the box for text and logicals and errors because I only want to select the cells that have constant numbers in them. I'll click OK. They've been selected. I'll choose a color. It can be yellow, green, whatever I want. I'll choose yellow again. There we go. And although a minor step, at the moment, all the cells are highlighted and selected. I'll just click in cell A1 or any cell to unselect them. So the deed is done. I've recorded this macro. I'm ready to stop recording. I could go to the bottom of the screen and click that box just to the right of the word ready. If I don't see it there, or if I just prefer to be a little bit more methodical, I'll go back to the View tab and choose from the drop arrow on macros to the right, Stop Recording. So I have recorded this macro, and I use the keystroke shortcut Control-Shift-V. So I'm going to switch to a different worksheet maybe. Here's a worksheet. Well, not that one. That's not a good one. This one here maybe. Now, I want to know which cells have pure values here. It wouldn't take me long to figure this one out manually, but I just want to test the macro. Where's the active cell? It's anywhere in here. I'm going to press Control-Shift-V. And there it is. Those are the only cells in this worksheet that contain pure values. The others, I assume, are formulas, text, of course, here and there. So that's a reasonable enough test.